Hey everyone, Anthony here from IGN, here with this really cool footage of Company Heroes. So you'll notice that I've paused it. It's because I wanted to sit here and break down some of the cool stuff that you're going to see in this footage and what kind of sets Company Heroes apart as far as real-time strategy games go. So looking at this right here, you know, Company Heroes 2, the thing is that this takes place on the Eastern Front. So you have Russian versus German forces, obviously. So you can see in this, it looks like we have probably what are, you know, the most infamous of Russian tanks, the T-34. You see some Russian infantry down the right-hand side, but more importantly, you get a real good view of what Company Heroes does that's really special, which is the way that it handles environmental damage and you know, it's graphical fidelity that kind of gets across a certain level of realism that a lot of other strategies don't get. So if we just let it roll for a second here, you'll see, like, you can see the way that houses burn. I'm going to rewind it for a second. You get to see the way that houses actually burn and fall apart, and that, you know, there's actually destruction and potholes going on in the way that the rounds are hitting the street. Those will leave divots behind that will actually affect, you know, the way that the game plays. I mean, it's a certain level of fidelity there that isn't a lot of other games. You also get your first look here at the cold tech that's going on. That's what they call it. What it really translates into is that they've added, you know, the biggest factor in the Eastern Front War, more than soldiers probably, was the fact of how cold it got and that there was snow. Snow is going to play a huge factor in this. We'll get a better look at that in just a moment. So I'm going to let it roll here. And right here you get to see a couple of other things that are really important to Company Heroes 2. On the right-hand side, you can see these German soldiers. You know, they're manning a position. You have a mortar team there, firing off shells at this ice. Now, normally you would see a tank like this coming at infantry with a mortar, and there's a MG42 down in the bottom left, and you would think, you know, okay, what are they going to do? This infantry, they're going to clean up no problem because they're going to get suppressed. Suppression is obviously still a huge factor in Company Heroes. But this tank, there's not much an MG42 or a mortar can do. The mortar might be able to get a lucky strike on it, but in all likelihood, the tank's going to win. But with the cold tech stuff that's going on in Company Heroes 2, you'll notice that they're crossing over a frozen river. Now, all these tanks have a certain weight that they're, you know, the pressure that they're putting down on this river, and a well-placed shot can actually crack that ice and cause them to sink. I think we'll get to see that in just a second, right there. And then just like that, you can lose a tank. You know, it means that there are a lot more traversal points on the map. You know, like now, instead of there being one crossing point across this river, there's a bunch. You can cross anywhere that the ice is frozen, but it also means that it's a much larger risk-reward factor. Letting it roll right here, we get a good look at the way that Company Heroes 2, you know, just like the first game, hires and handles environmental destruction. You'll notice that this building right here, this wooden barn, is just kind of being totally wrecked as this tank kind of rolls through. You know, the tank, it looks like someone fires a shot or the tank fires a shot, but either way, it shreds this barn. I mean, it looks amazing. But more importantly, it also means that that building can't be used for cover. You know, you could put units up in there and have them taking cover, and these buildings can actually be destroyed, and that will affect the way that the battlefield changes. All of a sudden, that cover isn't there. It also means that that tank now will be visible to maybe units that couldn't see it before if that building goes down. And you also get here to see the way that they've actually added the fact that buildings burn now. So this building that you see in the upper left is on fire, and now if you were to send in like an engineer unit in the old game in Company Heroes 1, they could flame a building, but it didn't necessarily set it on fire. It was the flame would hit the building, the guys inside would be damaged, but the building itself would carry on. In this, buildings can catch fire, eventually they can burn down. So fire is a persistent thing where you can actually change the battlefield permanently by lighting something on fire. In this picture, you also get a look at a different Russian tank. This one to me looks like a heavier Russian tank, maybe an IS-2. But you also get to see the way that the German force still obviously uses half-tracks a lot. In this case, we have a mortar half-track, it looks like, as well as these ones here that look like a combination of Nebelwerfers from the first game and mortars, and I think they're called Panzerwerfers. And yeah, Panzerwerfers will kind of seem like they'll be the German army's answer to the Katyusha rocket trucks that the Russians have. We'll keep on going here. Obviously, they're in a bad way when a Russian tank is kind of firing on those half-tracks like that. Definitely not going to be doing very well against that. And then here what we get to look at is really how cold tech is going to affect gameplay. you see these Russian soldiers. They're plodding through a blizzard. Now, blizzards will strike dynamically on the winter maps. And so when a blizzard hits, it means that your soldiers have to get to cover, or else you'll see them, they're going to actually be falling to their deaths. So you'll see that as they're kind of plodding through this, and you get a really good look at the animation, the way that they have to, really lift their legs to get up through that snow, and it's going to take them a lot of extra effort, which means that, if they're moving against an enemy position, it's going to be really slow, and it's going to be really hard, and they're also going to leave tracks that can be tracked by enemy units. But you also get to see there's a guy here that falls to his death, so you can lose whole units unless you get them out of the cold and into cover. Cover will definitely save their lives, as will trucks, armored personnel carriers will actually save them if they're able to get into cover, which will make a huge difference and actually makes them a lot more important on winter maps. It's also cool because you get to see this winter map, and the thing about multiplayer is that there's going to be winter and spring versions of a lot of the maps. So if we just go back here for a second to even earlier, this part right here where you see this river, this is a winter version of a map, but there could just as easily be a spring one where this won't even be a battle that would necessarily take place, and it would never take place in this manner, because there would be a few set crossing points, or maybe a few bridges that would be much more important to hold because they're the only access points. Going back to where we were, here we just get a kind of up close and personal look at the beauty of what Relic's always done with their strategy games. You have these German units fighting what looks like a Russian T-34 facing off against a German armored vehicle. And one of the things that's important to note here is that just like Company Heroes 1, Company Heroes 2, facing of your armor matters. In real life, tanks often have the weakest armor on their undersides and on the back, and these tanks have the rear armor is very weak. And so they've actually added a reverse option now to where you can tell your tanks to only move in reverse, so that when you click a spot behind them, they don't stupidly turn and face their rear armor at the enemy. That's going to make a huge difference in multiplayer battles. Obviously he's trying to get a flank on this guy to hit him in a more weaker armored spot. Going right on ahead here, this is just a really great example of how crazy the carnage can get. Now, Company Heroes doesn't have the speed of something like StarCraft, but it gets nuts even though there's so fewer units. Here in the upper top there, you can see 2 Katyusha rocket trucks just raining destruction down on these half tracks and all this infantry that's in here. Meanwhile, you have infantry that are just duking it out in the streets. You have people looking for cover. They could be trying to hole up in this building, but those Katyushas really are just letting them have it. And this is the coolest part probably in the whole video for longtime fans like myself. You get to see the interface here for the first time. We're looking at a squad of engineers here, and you get to notice a few things. One is that if you look on the map in the bottom left, Relic has said that they wanted to reduce the number of capture points. They don't want it to be all about how fast you can seize these points. They want it to be about fewer points and keeping the focus on the fighting. But other changes to the interface that you get to see here are that they've done some interesting things, like instead of attack being, you click A on the keyboard and then with your mouse click where you want it to be, now they've changed attack to Q. So your longtime fans like myself are going to have to do a lot of learning of what these new buttons are. Also on the right hand side, if you look, you'll see the new commander tree. Instead of the traditional commander thing where you actually pick one commander tree from 3 once you're in the battle, the way that it works now is that you'll have a bunch of commanders that you can unlock over time, and then before the battle, when you're in multiplayer, you pick 3, and your opponent gets to see which 3 you picked, but then you're going to pick one of those when you're actually in the match. So the commander on the other side, the enemy, kind of has an idea of what you might do, but he doesn't actually get to know until you choose to do it. And so these commander abilities, instead of being trees, it's just like a tier system. So on the bottom one here, his lowest one is 2 points, and then there's one I think that's 3, and then the top 2 are 6. So when he hits commander level 6, he'll actually get both of those at once. He's not having to allocate points into the tree to go where he wants. He just kind of unlocks these abilities, through play. It just happens organically. There's no actually allocation of points, which is very different from traditional Company Heroes. And this last scene that we get to see here is just, more beauty of what makes Company Heroes so cool. Defended position, 2 AT guns just raining fire on these lighter German tanks here, just really laying waste. You get to see really awesome smoke effects, and it's a daytime map too, so you get to see the way that maps definitely change the way that things play. It's also kind of a good note to say that in multiplayer, you'll be able to choose, in some cases, the certain maps will have years associated with them in the campaign. So based on the year that the map takes place will actually affect the tech that you'll be bringing into battle as well. But yeah, that's kind of a large overview of what kind of makes Company Heroes 2 special and why a lot of us over here at IGN are really looking forward to it. And for a lot more on Company Heroes 2, you should always go to IGN.